Soldier accidentally joins a date with the silent Empress, and her 6 fierce daughters desired him too. The soldier walked alone under the pale lights of the alien city. His boots pressed against the stone road that seemed alive with faint blue veins, glowing softly in the night. He had been separated from his unit hours ago during a march that went wrong. Strange crowds of beings moved past him, tall creatures with faces hidden under masks of silver, merchants with wings that folded tightly around their bodies, and silent guards dressed in dark armor. None of them paid him much attention, and yet every step he took felt like someone was watching. He did not know where the streets were leading him. The city was built like a maze, with arches that reached toward the sky and towers that leaned against one another like frozen giants. He searched for a place to rest, somewhere safe, but all he found were doors sealed with unknown symbols. The night grew colder, and hunger pressed against his stomach. Then at the end of a wide road he saw a palace glowing with warm golden lights. Its gates stood open, guarded by 2 statues that looked as if they could come alive at any second. He thought it was perhaps an inn or a hall for travelers. He did not know the danger waiting inside. The soldier stepped forward with caution. He expected the guards to stop him, to raise their weapons and question his presence. But no one moved. The armored figures at the gate bowed their heads slightly as if they had been waiting for him. Confused, he entered. The walls shimmered with crystal patterns, and long banners of deep red hung down, covered with marks he could not read. The air smelled of spice and burning incense strong enough to make his eyes water. He walked down a corridor lit with fire trapped inside glass, and soon the sound of soft music reached his ears. When he entered the grand hall, his heart froze. A long table stretched before him, filled with food he had never seen before. Bowls of glowing fruit, plates of steaming meat, cups that smoked as if alive. At the head of the table sat a woman unlike anyone he had ever seen. She wore robes of silver that flowed across the floor like liquid, and her face was hidden behind a mask of crystal. Around her sat 6 other figures, younger, their eyes sharp and bright, their beauty both frightening and unreal. They all turned when the soldier entered, and silence fell heavy over the hall. He realized too late that he had made a mistake. This was no inn. This was no place for a lost human soldier. He had walked into a private gathering, a royal gathering. His throat tightened and his body begged him to run, but the doors behind him had already closed. The woman at the head of the table did not speak. She simply raised one hand, and the guards lining the walls did not move. The 6 daughters whispered to one another, their voices soft, almost like the rustling of blades. One of them tilted her head, studying him with eyes that glowed faintly blue. Another leaned forward, lips curving into a sharp smile. The soldier's legs shook, but he forced himself to stand tall. He had been trained for war, for fear, for sudden death. Yet this was something different. He had stumbled into the den of predators, and they had accepted his presence. One of the daughters finally spoke, her voice calm but sharp as glass. "He has come," another laughed quietly. "Not by choice. Look at him. He does not even know where he stands." The soldier's heart pounded. He wanted to explain, to tell them that he had entered by mistake, that he was lost, that he did not mean to disturb them. But the eyes of the woman at the head of the table, the silent Empress, pinned him in place. She had not spoken a single word, yet her gaze told him that his excuses would not matter. He had been chosen, whether by fate or by her own hidden design. A servant appeared beside him, moving silently as a shadow, and placed a cup in his hand. The drink inside shimmered with shifting colors, alive like liquid fire. The soldier hesitated, but every eye at the table watched him. With slow breath, he raised the cup and swallowed. The taste burned his tongue and spread through his body like lightning. The daughters smiled, some amused, some impressed. The Empress lowered her head slightly, a gesture so small it might have gone unseen, yet it carried the weight of command. A seat was pulled for him, directly across from the 6 daughters. He sat stiff and uncertain, but he understood one thing. He could not leave. The music grew louder, and the servants filled the table with more dishes. The daughters leaned forward, their voices mixing into a storm of questions and laughter. They wanted to know his name, his origin, his purpose. He answered carefully, his words simple and plain. He told them he was a soldier, nothing more, nothing less. They listened with strange interest, as if every word carried a secret they wished to unravel. The silent Empress did not move. She remained still, her mask reflecting the light of the burning lamps. Her hands folded, her silence heavier than all their voices combined. The soldier could feel her presence pressing against him, colder than steel, sharper than any weapon. He did not know why he had been allowed to stay. He did not know why the Empress's guards had bowed instead of killing him. He did not know why her daughters stared at him as though he were both prey and treasure. But deep inside he understood one thing clearly. His life had already changed. The moment he stepped into that hall, the moment he sat at that table, his fate had been sealed, and somewhere behind that mask the Empress watched, waiting to see what he would become. The hall grew quiet after the soldier took his seat. The 6 daughters leaned back, their glowing eyes fixed on him like hunters circling prey. But the true weight came from the woman at the head of the table. The silent Empress. She did not move, did not speak, and yet her presence filled every corner of the chamber. Her gaze was not ordinary. It was heavy, like a blade resting against the back of the neck. Every breath the soldier took felt tested, measured, and judged. He tried not to look at her for too long, but each time his eyes strayed, he found hers waiting. Behind that crystal mask, her silence screamed louder than any voice. It was a silence that demanded answers, a silence that did not forgive lies, a silence that stripped him down until there was nothing left but truth. The daughter spoke first. One, with hair like strands of burning copper, leaned forward. "Tell us, soldier of Earth, why have you come here?" He swallowed hard. His hands shook under the table, but he kept his voice steady. "I was lost. I had no path, no guide. I thought this place was a hall for travelers. I did not know." A sharp laugh broke the air. Another daughter, taller than the rest, with eyes cold as ice, tapped her long fingers against the edge of her cup. "You walked into the court of the Empress by mistake. Do you expect us to believe such a thing?" The soldier nodded. "It is the truth," the daughters whispered among themselves, some amused, others doubtful. One of them, with skin pale as moonlight and eyes filled with strange hunger, studied him closely. "A truth spoken without fear. Either you are a fool, or you are braver than most who stand before us." The soldier could feel his heartbeat echoing in his ears, but he said nothing more. He remembered the gaze of the Empress. It was not the daughters who would decide his fate. It was her. For a long moment she remained still. Then slowly the Empress raised her hand. A servant appeared instantly carrying a bowl of glowing fruit. The Empress pointed toward the soldier. The servant placed the bowl before him. The soldier hesitated. Each fruit pulsed faintly as if alive. He picked one up and bit into it. Sweetness spilled across his tongue, followed by a heat that burned his throat and filled his chest with fire. He forced himself not to cough, not to show weakness. The daughters watched eagerly, waiting for him to fail. But he kept chewing until nothing remained. A small sound came from the Empress. Not a word, not a laugh, but something softer, like breath escaping glass. The daughters froze. Their eyes widened. It was not speech, but it was a sign. The Empress had acknowledged him. The hall shifted after that. The daughters grew louder, pressing him with sharper questions. One demanded to know the strength of Earth's armies. Another asked what treasures humans carried. Another leaned close, whispering promises of power if he would serve her instead of their mother. Each voice came like a different weapon, cutting from a new angle, testing his patience, his resolve, his heart. But the soldier did not break. He answered with the only thing he had, his honesty. He spoke of Earth not as a place of great wealth or power, but as a home. He told them of its sky, its seas, its storms, its quiet fields. He spoke of comrades who fought beside him, of ordinary men and women who lived not as rulers or warriors, but as families, as workers, as dreamers. His words were simple, and yet they carried something the daughters had never heard before. One of them leaned back, her expression unreadable. "Strange. He speaks not of conquest, not of dominion, but of memory, of roots," another frowned. "It is weakness." The soldier met her gaze. "It is strength." The silence that followed was sharp. Even the servant seemed frozen, waiting for punishment to fall on him. But the Empress did not punish him. She did not move at all. She only stared. Her mask reflected the firelight, and her stillness was more terrifying than any anger. The daughters grew restless. They shifted in their seats, some intrigued, some irritated. One of them, her eyes glowing like molten gold, slammed her hand onto the table. The plates shook. "Then prove it, human. If your words are strength, then let them shield you from our mother's gaze." The soldier turned. The Empress's eyes locked with his, and for the first time he did not look away. The silence between them deepened, stretching into eternity. He could feel her searching his soul, cutting through every memory, every scar, every hidden thought. His chest tightened and sweat slid down his back, but he did not flinch. He held her gaze, steady and unbroken. Finally, the Empress lowered her head slightly. It was the same gesture as before, quiet but commanding. The tension in the room cracked like ice under weight. The daughters fell silent. Servants moved again. Music returned, low and haunting. The soldier's breath came heavy, but he did not let them see. He realized that he had passed something, a test he could not name, a trial without rules. The Empress had judged him and found something in him that kept him alive. But he also understood another truth. This was only the beginning. The Empress had not spoken yet, but when she did, the real trial would begin, and in that heavy silence, with 6 daughters whispering and the silent Empress staring like a shadow that would never blink, the soldier knew he was no longer a guest. He was a piece in a game older and darker than anything he had ever known. The hall no longer felt like a place of food and music. It had become a field of quiet war. The silent Empress sat still, her gaze never shifting, but her daughters began to move like storm winds circling the soldier. They were no longer content to watch. Each of them wished to test him, to pull him closer, to make him stumble. Their desires were sharp and fierce, and each one carried its own danger. The first daughter rose from her chair. She was tall and strong, her shoulders wrapped in dark armor that shimmered faintly. Her eyes blazed like fire trapped in stone. Without a word, she placed a cup of burning wine before the soldier. The liquid glowed red, heat rising from it in waves. She smiled, a smile both proud and cruel. "Drink," she said. "If your body can carry fire, then your spirit is worth notice." The soldier lifted the cup. The scent was harsh like smoke and iron, but he did not hesitate. He drank. Flames tore through his throat and into his chest. His vision blurred, but he did not fall. He placed the cup back on the table and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. The first daughter laughed, a laugh of respect. "He burns, but he does not break." The second daughter leaned forward. She wore robes of silver threads that shimmered like water, her face pale, her eyes sharp and cold. She drew a thin blade from her belt and laid it across the table. "Strength is nothing without courage. Place your hand upon the blade. Let blood prove that you do not fear pain." The soldier stared at the weapon. The steel looked alive, its edge whispering danger. Slowly he placed his hand upon it and pressed. Pain cut into his skin, warm blood rising between his fingers. He did not pull back. He let the sting stay until the blade was painted red. Only then did he lift his hand. The second daughter's lips curved. Not a smile, not mockery, something closer to respect. The third daughter was smaller, her movements graceful, her eyes soft like shadows under the moon. She spoke in a whisper that seemed to brush against his ear. "Tell me of your home," she said. "Not of war, not of duty. Tell me of the things you miss when you close your eyes." The soldier paused. The weight of silence pressed upon him, but he answered. He told her of the rivers of earth, the smell of rain on soil, the sound of birds in the morning. He spoke of comrades laughing beside a fire, of simple meals, of quiet nights under a wide sky. His words were plain, but they carried warmth that none of the daughters had ever known. The third daughter's eyes softened. She whispered, "Your world lives in you still." The fourth daughter struck like a sudden storm. She slammed her hand on the table, her voice sharp. "Weak words. Weak dreams. What is a world worth if you cannot fight for it?" She stood and pointed to the soldier with fierce pride. "Raise your voice. Shout the name of your world as if you were standing in battle. Show us that your blood belongs to something greater than fear." The soldier drew a deep breath. His throat burned from the wine, his hand throbbed with pain, but his voice rose. He shouted the name of Earth, not with anger but with strength. The sound echoed across the hall, shaking the banners and rattling the plates. For a moment the hall seemed to bow to his cry. The fourth daughter's eyes blazed and she nodded. The fifth daughter was different. She leaned back, her smile sly, her eyes glowing with playful danger. "You are not bound by fear nor broken by pain. But tell me, soldier, can you resist temptation?" She reached for a fruit that pulsed with golden light and placed it close to his lips. "One bite and you will taste power beyond any soldier's dream. One bite and you will never be the same." The soldier stared at the fruit. Its glow called to him. Its scent filled his lungs with strange sweetness. But he pushed it away gently. "I am human. I will remain human." The fifth daughter laughed, a sharp, playful sound. Then you are harder to claim than I thought. The sixth daughter did not speak at first. She only stared at him with eyes like knives, her expression a mask of jealousy and challenge. Finally, she leaned forward. They test you, they tempt you, they listen to your weak words. But I will tell you this, none of them deserve you. If you wish to live, you must claim one of us. You must choose. If you do not, you will be torn apart by their hunger. The hall grew quiet. The soldier felt the eyes of all six upon him. Each daughter's desire was fierce in its own way. One wished for his strength. One wished for his courage. One wished for his memory. One wished for his pride. One wished for his temptation. One wished for his choice. He did not answer. He could not. To choose one was to betray the others. To choose none was to risk death. He lowered his gaze to the table, steadying his breath, and silence filled the room again. The silent Empress had not moved, had not spoken, but her presence grew heavier, as if she too waited to see what he would do. The daughters leaned closer, their whispers rising like wind before a storm. The soldier's heart pounded, his body trembling, but his eyes remained steady. He realized then that this was not only a meal, it was a war of hearts, a war of desire, a war he could not escape. And somewhere behind the crystal mask, the silent Empress's gaze deepened as if she alone knew where this path would lead. The hall had grown restless. The daughters argued in whispers, their sharp voices rising like hidden blades, each trying to pull the soldier into her orbit. Yet above their noise, the silent Empress remained still. Her crystal mask glowed faintly in the firelight, her silence deeper than shadow, her presence heavier than stone. She had not spoken, and that silence had become unbearable. The soldier felt the weight of it pressing into his chest. He knew that sooner or later she would move, and when she did, everything would change. At last, the Empress rose from her chair. The movement was slow, graceful, but it silenced the entire hall. The six daughters froze, their eyes widening. The guards stiffened. Even the servants turned to stone. The soldier swallowed hard, his pulse quickening. Every sound in the world seemed to vanish, leaving only the soft rustle of her silver robes as they flowed across the floor. She stepped toward him, each step ringing like a strike of a bell. When she reached the center of the hall, she raised her hand. Symbols carved into the walls flared to life, glowing with strange light. The ground trembled. The air grew heavy, thick with energy that stung the skin. The soldier gripped the edge of the table as the hall shifted around him. The banners curled as if caught in invisible wind. The floor split with glowing cracks and the world dissolved into darkness. He was no longer in the palace. He stood alone in a vast empty space where the ground was black glass and the sky burned red. His heart raced, his throat dry. He turned in every direction, but there was no one else. The Empress had thrown him into something he did not understand, a trial, a test. From the red sky came visions. They fell like sparks, each one bursting into shape before him. He saw earth burning, cities swallowed by fire. He saw soldiers falling one by one, their cries echoing in his ears. He saw comrades who had fought beside him turning their backs, leaving him alone. Pain twisted in his chest as he watched the people he loved fade into ash. The soldier clenched his fists, shaking his head. "No," he whispered. "This is not real." But the visions did not stop. They grew sharper. He saw himself failing, kneeling before alien armies, his world chained and broken. He saw himself as nothing, powerless, forgotten. Fear clawed into his mind, pulling at him, urging him to collapse. Then another vision came. Softer, crueler. He saw Earth not destroyed but gone. Erased as if it had never existed. The rivers, the skies, the forests all vanished. He was left floating in emptiness, his home stripped from reality. He felt himself screaming, but no sound came. The soldier fell to his knees, his body shaking. The test was not of his strength, not of his courage, but of his spirit. The Empress was tearing open his soul, showing him every fear he had ever buried. If he broke here, he would not return. He would vanish like the visions of his world. He closed his eyes. He forced himself to breathe. In that suffocating darkness, he clung to a single memory. A night back on Earth, quiet with comrades gathered around a fire. The sound of laughter. The smell of smoke. The wide sky filled with stars. It was simple, small, but it was real. That memory held him like an anchor in the storm. When he opened his eyes, the visions were still there, clawing at him, but they no longer ruled him. He stood, his legs unsteady but strong. "You can show me fear," he whispered, his voice hoarse, "but it will not own me." The illusions cracked. The burning cities faded. The broken comrades dissolved. The empty sky collapsed into shards of red light. The ground shook one last time, and then the world shattered. He was back in the palace hall. His breath came heavy. Sweat covered his skin, his wounded hand trembled. The daughters stared at him with wide eyes. Some were shocked, some angry, some almost pleased. But all of them knew what had happened. The Empress had tested him, and he had not fallen. The silent Empress stood before him. Her crystal mask caught the light, reflecting his pale, exhausted face back at him. For the first time, she tilted her head ever so slightly, as if considering him not as prey, not as accident, but as something else. The daughters whispered. Impossible. He should have broken. No human can stand against her gaze. Their voices cracked with disbelief, but the Empress raised her hand and they fell silent. The soldier lowered his eyes, breathing hard, but he did not kneel. He stood as he was, battered yet unbroken. The silence stretched on, heavier than before. Then came a sound, soft, almost hidden, the Empress's voice. It was not a word, not yet, but a whisper of sound that felt like it was spoken inside the soul rather than the ear. It froze the blood of every daughter, every guard, every servant. The soldier shivered. He had survived her trial, but he realized with dread that this was only the first step. The Empress had looked into his heart and found something she had not expected. But what she would do with that discovery remained unknown. He lifted his gaze. Behind that crystal mask, her eyes glowed faintly. They were not eyes of mercy nor of hatred, but of endless depth, eyes that carried hunger, power, and a secret thought too vast for him to understand. And as the hall trembled with silence, the soldier knew that the Empress had marked him. His fate was no longer his own. The hall was no longer filled with music or laughter. It was filled with silence that seemed heavier than iron. The silent Empress had tested the soldier, and he had endured. Now she returned to her throne, her silver robes flowing behind her like a river of starlight. She raised her hand slightly, and the servants withdrew into the shadows. The guards stiffened at the edges of the chamber, their weapons glowing faintly, but their eyes never left the human who stood at the center of their ruler's gaze. The 6 daughters leaned forward in their seats. Each of them looked at the soldier with fire in her eyes. They no longer saw him as a stranger who had stumbled into their mother's hall. They saw him as something rare, something worth claiming. Their desires had sharpened into hunger, and they would not hide it any longer. The first daughter stood. Her armor clinked softly as she moved toward him, her tall frame casting a long shadow across the floor. "You have strength," she said. "Drink fire, bleed steel, and you still stand. Join me, and I will make you commander of armies greater than anything your world has seen. Together we will burn paths across the stars." The soldier said nothing. His eyes remained steady, though his heart pounded. The second daughter rose, her silver robes trailing behind her. Her blade flashed in her hand as she pressed its flat edge against her palm. A drop of her blood shimmered like liquid crystal. "Courage is in you," she whispered. "Stand with me, and I will make you immortal. Pain will never touch you again. You will walk beside me as eternal flame." Before he could respond, the third daughter approached. Her steps were light, her eyes soft, her voice like wind through leaves. "Do not listen to them," she said gently. "You do not need to burn or to conquer. Choose me, and I will give you peace. You will know dreams richer than power. You will know a home where no war can reach." The soldier's throat tightened. He thought of Earth, of quiet fields, of nights under the stars. But the fourth daughter would not let silence hold. She rose with sudden fury, her voice sharp as a blade. "Peace is weakness. Choose me, soldier. Together we will raise banners so high that no empire will stand above us. I will give you pride beyond measure, glory beyond death. Your name will be carved in every world." Her words echoed like thunder, shaking the chamber. The fifth daughter moved next, her smile sly, her golden eyes glowing with playful danger. She held a piece of fruit in her hand, the same fruit she had tempted him with before. "Forget pride. Forget peace. Choose me, and I will give you desire itself. Riches beyond count, pleasures no mortal has ever tasted. With me every night will burn, and you will never hunger again." The soldier felt the weight of her gaze. His body trembled, not from fear, but from the pull of temptation. Finally, the sixth daughter rose slowly. She did not smile, did not shout, did not tempt with gifts. She only walked close, her eyes sharp, her voice quiet. "None of them matter. If you want to live, if you want to be more than a toy in their games, choose me. I will fight them all. I will take you away, and no one will touch you. But if you refuse me, I will destroy you before they ever have the chance." The air shook with her words. The soldier stood frozen, 6 daughters circling him like stars around a sun. Each one promised something different: power, courage, peace, glory, pleasure, survival. His mind spun, his chest tightened. If he chose one, he would betray the others. If he chose none, he might not leave alive. All eyes turned to the Empress. She had not spoken, not since the trial. But her silence was more dangerous than their voices. Her gaze pinned him, colder than steel, sharper than fire. She was waiting. She wanted to see what he would choose. The soldier's breath came heavy. He remembered the visions she had forced him to endure. The burning earth, the shattered comrades, the emptiness of being forgotten. He remembered the pain in his hand, the fire in his chest, the weight of temptation pressing against him. And still he stood. He looked at each daughter in turn. At the fire of the first, the steel of the second, the softness of the third, the pride of the fourth, the temptation of the fifth, the sharp hunger of the sixth. They all desired him. Not for who he was, but for what he had survived, for what they believed he could give them. And then his eyes lifted to the Empress. Behind her mask, her gaze burned brighter than all of them. She did not need to speak her desire. It was written in the silence itself. She was the shadow above their fire, the force that held their hunger together, and she was the one who had marked him. The soldier's chest rose and fell. His lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. His choice, whatever it was, would bind him forever. He could feel the weight of destiny pressing against him, sharp as the blade he had once placed his hand upon. The hall grew colder, quieter. The daughters leaned closer, waiting for his voice. The guards shifted, their hands tightening on their weapons. The servants froze like stone. The Empress tilted her head, her silence deeper than ever. The soldier's heart pounded, his throat dry, his mind torn between paths that could never be undone. He drew in one long, shaking breath, and in that breath, the story hung suspended between life and death, between freedom and chains, between the desires of 6 daughters and the gaze of one silent Empress. The choice was his. But the price of it would echo across the stars.